I'm Adrian. I'm one of the co-founders of Adoma and Hamada. People have already told you many things about this, so I'll keep it brief. Yeah, that's it.
Hi, I'm Marissa. I was speaking earlier, but I work at Talon, which is a company building collaboration and communication tools on top of Urbit.
I'm Althea, and I work on the privacy and scaling explorations team at the Ethereum Foundation, and I lead communications there.
You know, I believe, so I think we should do more repetition. I think that we should be anti-efficiency. We should be inefficient, and find the additional richness in inefficiency. So thank you, everyone, for being inefficient and reintroducing yourselves. So, you know, right now, like sort of like blockchain space, we have like either fully transparent or we have sort of kind of fully private. I guess in the bridging aspect, we have some nuance. Like, can we like describe what privacy is, like in a more sort of nuanced way? Maybe like everyone, you're like, what? Like if you were to think of privacy as like a spectrum, like some images of privacy, like what do you think? And I guess we'll start at the end.
Okay, images of privacy. I guess when I think of privacy, I honestly go back to kind of like what are the building blocks of it. And so I think a lot about just, you know, ownership, intimacy, how do we create at least like more transparency for the individual or community.
Yeah, I think privacy, I mostly think about functional privacy, and when I think about privacy, I think about sort of like what kind of privacy guarantees can we build for people that don't get blockchains? Because like right in the end, this doesn't really matter if normal people don't use it. So I typically think of my parents and sort of the functional privacy that these systems can provide for them. So you mentioned earlier that you thought of this as a spectrum. And I think currently we very much live in this very binary world where either you are sort of in a fully transparent system, and people keep arguing to me that this is a good thing and we should keep these fully transparent systems. But I think what we really want is like personal agency where people get the choice what they want to disclose, which is roughly how the traditional system works, as in you're mostly private unless you make a conscious choice to expose that data to a third party. And I think this is sort of the model we should be building towards.
So, yeah, you said a spectrum, but I actually think in terms of I actually think about concentric circles when it comes to privacy, or maybe more concretely, a house. That there's my bedroom, and then there's like my living room and my kitchen, and then there's my yard, and then there's my neighborhood, and then there's my state and my country, and then there's the whole world. And in each of these places, I have like sort of increasing or decreasing control over what goes on, who sees what happens in there, sort of how much people see or know about me. And I think that privacy should work the same way, that kind of depending on context, depending on your level of trust, depending on your like level of familiarity, you should know who's in the room with you, or know that you don't know who's in the room with you, and be able to, like you were saying, kind of choose based on that what you disclose, and like that should come naturally. It shouldn't be having to like figure out what the hell is going on and opt out if you need to, but that the disclosure is active and not sort of the default.
So I want to sort of highlight a few things that maybe we can discuss. The first is the relationship between privacy and control that you brought up, and then privacy and choice. And then you said something very interesting, privacy and intimacy. Did I hear you correctly? And I think that is also really interesting. One of the things that I thought about when you were talking about the house is I teach, and I just taught Donna Haraway's Cyborg Manifesto last week. Has anyone read it here? Oh, good. It's better than my class. I don't think anyone read it. And there's this great, privacy was originally had to do with what was in the house, the oikos, and the public was the sphere of business and government, and privacy, women were associated with privacy, and it was like it was like related to freedom, and being public was related to expanded freedom. So like there was this gender component. So I feel like there's an opportunity to really unpack what privacy is. But I guess going back, like what would you say? What are some ways that privacy and control that you see how they're related, and how we can sort of play with it with how we're developing interfaces or language around blockchain? And I guess we'll start with you. Privacy and control.
Yeah, I kind of feel like interfaces are actually where we're falling behind right now because like so much has developed around zero-knowledge proofs. Lots of really interesting and kind of organic things are possible. But I think that we're still struggling to figure out how to design for that. And I mean, it's tricky sort of working in the context of the Web 2 aesthetic or like what people think of as the user flow and this idea that I don't really truck with, that like everything has to be easy and simple, and like people don't like to do hard things or people don't like to do work. I don't really think that's true. I think that people just don't expect to, or like don't feel like that's their role. But so I think that like it's in designing the process of doing that, like making that process intelligible and interesting and like feel natural. I think that's where we still haven't really figured out what we're doing yet.
I think privacy and control comes a lot down to defaults. As in the defaults need to be safe. People shouldn't be expected to do extra work in order to be in control of their data. This should, like, the safe default should always be fully private unless you make an active choice to change this. Especially on sort of the people, as you said, people keep saying this, well, the UX trade-offs are pretty harsh, and I'd argue this is mostly because from an engineering perspective, we don't like to spend enough time on like making this easy. There's nothing inherently difficult about having privacy-preserving applications, like privacy-preserving transfers, on a system like Zcash or Armada. It's just, you need to do engineering work at the wallet level to enable this. But like the basic user UX is still like there's a private key and they need to save this. That's it. And I think when people say that like there are UX challenges and privacy is going to be inherently difficult to convey to the end user, it's like you should probably just like hide this all behind the safe defaults. And like when you press send, it just does the right thing automatically and the user never knows about it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I do still think there is truly a UX problem, and we do have a problem with privacy in terms of just, yeah, there needs to be safe defaults. Obviously, the way personal computers work or blockchain works these days, it's not necessarily like just self-evident to who is using the system, right? I think we're starting to see a large backlash. It's like very fascinating to see. For example, you had that ad up there about Apple privacy, right? Like that's actually kind of crazy that that's in the public discourse right now. And so people are starting to care about it, but only because they're like, oh, there isn't this kind of like one-to-one with how I thought things were working. And so part of it, sure, I think is like we could make this easier, but it's also how many decisions do people need to make? Where in the UI is that going to occur? And to whom? And right, like how can we also make this communal in some way? How can we use other communities and piggyback on other kind of standards?
Yeah, I think like one problem with making things easy is that it can end up actually taking choices away from people by kind of making assumptions about what they want, which I don't think is what you're trying to do. Like, I don't think that that's what you're saying, but I think like another risk that we run is sort of getting people out of the mode of questioning, of like paying attention to what decisions they're making, paying attention to what they're trusting or who they're trusting, which as of right now is not a safe thing. like, I would love to believe that, like, there will be a world someday where I can assume that things are default safe. But right now, I think it's also really important to sort of give people the tools and the information to know, like, what questions to ask and what assumptions they're making by doing whatever easy thing.
Yeah, I agree with this, but I would say I think especially in the sort of, because the blockchain space is very engineering driven at the moment, we tend to make the choice, like kind of like when you think of how Linux works, right? Like Linux allows you to do many different things. It exposes many different options to the end user, and I think this is what's currently going to hurt us because sort of before you can use a mobile wallet, you have to read the 15 pages of instructions on how to do so safely. I think that's never going to work, and so I kind of just hope that we end up that we're working towards a world where, like, you can click the advanced button to get all this optionality, where you can then like question what choices you want to make, but by default, it just like works, and we don't have to explain it to you because most people will not care. I mean, we see this currently also with existing infrastructure, right? Like we don't explain to every single user how TLS works when they go to like Gmail. We just assume that like the user can just assume that like that's the right thing. This is also how the traditional financial system works. It'd be crazy if the financial system worked in a way where, oh, you forgot to check this box and we've published your entire financial history on our website. Like this is like not a good model, I think. Like the defaults need to be somewhat there to protect the people that really don't want to pay attention.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I agree with that. Pretty much everything you just said. Like, I think that sort of progressive disclosure with some intentionality of giving people access to whatever level of information or understanding they want that is not just like a leap from, I don't know what TLS is, to now I'm an engineer. Like, there has to be something in between. So I think that we have kind of a responsibility to figure out what that looks like, and I don't necessarily have an answer for that.
Well, and that's also where I kind of keep coming back to how do you end up selecting that? And of course, there's like smart ways to disclose this, but also like when you think about historically how we've like used tools or organized, right? It's been in a community, right? Like there's someone else's role in your community to care about certain things, and not everyone is meant to care about everything at the same time, right? That's just decision fatigue.
And this also reminds me of what we were discussing earlier. One of the panels we're discussing about the ability to exit or the ability to say no, but also the knowledge that's involved in making those decisions. And I think it's interesting that, we're using zero knowledge proof, but like maybe we need more, 100% knowledge. In any case, but when you're talking about defaults, I think about like parameterization, and you brought up the idea of like I don't want all my financial information online, and it's like we do have different like personas or identities, right, as we're online, and like what does privacy look like? I think of like the images of like lunar punk and the dark forest and having different communities with different kinds of privacy. But like, what does privacy look like as an aspect of identity, as like what you reveal and what you don't reveal? So like, you talk about the house, like privacy as like who do I let in, or like sort of like a distance or relation. Like, how about privacy as as I'm building my identity as online or in the blockchain? What are your thoughts on this? We'll start in the middle.
NFTs.
Do you have fatigue? Do you have
Oh, NFTs, which is like very curious because there people don't want privacy. They want the specific ability to brag about them and have them tied to their personal identity, which I think is a use case that we should support. I mean, like, I personally don't really get NFTs, but people seem to like them. And people seem to want to put them on their like Twitter profiles and cryptographically link them to this, which is kind of strange to me because in the current model, this just like reveals your entire financial history of anything you've ever done in the space. And I think this is, so maybe we should think of like people want the ability to brag about certain things, right? Like maybe someone got paid $1 million bonus this year, and they just want to be able to reveal the fact that they got $1 million bonus without revealing that they spent $1 million the next year on cocaine, right? Like, so we want to enable these like very selective disclosure possibilities because people fundamentally want to be able to like showcase and not always be private.
We've actually thought a lot about this at Urbit and Talon. Our identity system, right, is actually an NFT, but it's special because we have a whole tiered structure of NFTs that end up spawning other types of NFTs, and eventually you get to one that we call a comet that's disposable, and so in our system we haven't fully implemented this, but we've talked about certain ideas around, right, like outfits. So yeah, I could walk into this digital space with my main NFT, right? Or I could use a slightly different one for other spaces, or I could have a completely disposable one for that kind of parody to that one time you went to Berlin and just got blackout, Just the one.
It's as you were both speaking, you have something to add to this? I mean, as you were both speaking, I was thinking of like the big distinction between like Web 2 and Web 3, right? In Web 2, I was trying to find my users, and in Web 3, all the wallets are available. I can send someone an NFT. They don't even have to, even if they don't want it. How do we think? I mean, is privacy even the right word to use anymore? Like, should we come up what do you think? It's not.
Privacy is a dirty word.
I don't think it is either.
Let's find a new word. What word?
Shielded. Because everyone keeps associating privacy with dark markets for some reason and buying drugs. And this is, I think, not the right mental image that we want to invoke in people's mind. So, for example, this comes to very basic branding choices. If you're doing a privacy thing, maybe don't make it black or blue or dark green kind of thing, because everyone's like, well, yeah, this looks like a privacy thing, I know. This looks like something I could be using to buy drugs online. Maybe make it like pink and yellow.
Yeah, that's where I kind of keep coming back to like intimacy, right? So I feel like, yeah, we have these two extremes. Like you're either working in extreme like atomization, right? You're like all alone, or you're working in extreme public, right? Like your wallet, everyone can see everything. And it's like, how do we find that space in the middle where, I'm working with my friends or my community or my team or whatnot? And so how do we find and create kind of like that space or that aesthetic?
Yeah, I wonder if part of the problem is that like what we are all talking about when we talk about privacy is not in fact one thing at all. It's like a whole bunch of things that like all get fucked up by the same problem. But that once you fix that problem, it splits into 100 separate other problems to solve. And so just saying privacy, I mean, I was thinking about this a lot also as I was putting that talk together, that like having privacy does not actually achieve any of the things that you want once you have privacy. You just have privacy. Now you still have to do all that other stuff.
Your vacation.
Right,
right?
Yeah. Right.
That was in the previous talk.
Yeah. But yeah, so I think that we try to like lump together a whole bunch of different things like protection and intimacy and agency and flexibility and expression, and we mean all of these things, and we say privacy, which doesn't actually mean any of those things. But I don't know if we have a word that's going to encompass everything that we do mean. Anyone?
I was just going to say, like, I mean, if you look at just like legislature, right? Like they have a terrible time, especially trying to figure out digital privacy and find terms around that.
Yeah, I have to say the sort of regulatory or the legislative landscape is just I mean, it was horrendous for the internet as a whole, and blockchains have just made it worse because legislators still don't really understand how the internet works, and like expecting these people to understand how blockchains or decentralized financial technology and privacy guarantees in those systems work. It's like, I think that's a fight we can never win effectively, because we've lost this for the internet mostly.
That's depressing.
No, but it's like, it's also positive. Like, we should just keep building cool shit. Like,
That's optimistic.
at some point, like, I'm kind of optimistic that I think as a space we've reached somewhat escape velocity, that we keep innovating faster than people can understand how it works. Thereby, it's very hard for sort of the legislators to catch up to what's the latest coolest shit. So there's like positives to it.
So, I want to, so I love the idea of like privacy, like maybe we need to like break apart what privacy is and like start talking about it in a more nuanced way. And maybe we've started doing that with, definitely we've been doing that with tokenomics, right? Like we have very nuanced ways of talking about that, but we don't really have nuanced ways of talking about what privacy is. Maybe we need to think about that in order to figure out what sovereignty is and what community is and what DAOs are. Someone said earlier today, like they don't believe in rights. Is that true? Am I misquoting someone?
That happened.
Does that happen? I'm like, was that today? I'm like, time doesn't exist. But I always think, like privacy or whatever it is, or this constellation of ideas around privacy. It's like, even though we have, life, liberty, and property, that's kind of like the beginning of privacy. Like, this is a new sort of value. Maybe it's like a post-Enlightenment value. And people value it differently. What do you think of like privacy as a value? Like, is this a new thing, or like how, or is it like, do we not have values anymore?
I think privacy is a value is ancient.
I think privacy is an ancient value.
Yeah, like historically, humans have been vastly more private than we are nowadays. Like, even if you go back like to the 70s, humans were vastly more private.
The 1970s.
Yeah, like prior to the internet.
Ancient history, like when I was young.
I mean, this guy gets, this gets better the further we go back. But generally speaking, like, most things weren't shared with the entirety of the world. Like, the fact that everyone shares a ton of their personal data online, or that even this data exists online, is a very recent phenomenon. So I would say privacy probably predates, privacy is a pretty old value in my opinion.
I agree, and I think like what you're getting at also is very true, that the idea of privacy has just had to sort of come into the light in a different way because the internet just changed everything. Like, privacy was the default for most of human history in most places at most times. And on that same panel, someone said something else that I thought was kind of beautiful, that I don't remember where it was in the Bible, but something about that you should pray to God in secret. And I think that's like a very kind of profound concept, but it also tells you that the idea of privacy is at least as old as the Bible, which is pretty old.
I mean, are you in agreement with the 70s and it's old?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think we can maybe talk about privacy, before or after the internet, because it starts to mean something very different, right? Especially with data, and really just the fact that we evolved because it was just easier to centralize software all on one server, therefore like move all of your data to someone else's server. And so it was really, I don't even necessarily think it was so malicious. We just ended up in this space where, hey, it was easier to do this. And then suddenly we're like clamoring to get back these kind of fractured aspects of ourselves, and starting to see, just like as it was more adopted, this fundamental data asymmetry. So I don't know. It's ancient and it's taking on, a new form.
I think you could plausibly trace it a little bit farther back also to like industrialization in like the Potemkin village, this like idea of efficiency as the highest goal, and therefore to like track and monitor and evaluate everything that everyone does at all times, like is a worthy sacrifice if it means that we can make the car 5 seconds faster. So that's a little bit before the 70s, but I feel like that kind of like efficiency obsession has also played into the sort of datafication of human beings in the last century or so.
True, actually, I just realized another, maybe even slightly later example, passports. Passports weren't really a thing until maybe 120 years ago. Like, they're, in terms of human...
You play Papers, Please?
Hmm?
You play Papers, Please?
No.
You should look at it.
Okay.
Play it? Passports?
Yeah, so like, we didn't even have a system of like a single human being has a completely fixed identity that they can never change until, I think it was World War I or World War II that really drove the adoption of passports across the globe. So like privacy like used to exist in a very fundamental way prior to this.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I would agree with all of that. Control over populations is really connected with industrialization, the need for biopower to power factories, maybe to power consumer capitalism. Maybe that's changing now. Maybe individuals did not have enough consciousness around what the importance of privacy, or like what, you know, I think now people are advocating perhaps more for privacy, maybe with an opportunity. Do you see, like, what do you think about privacy advocation? Like, do you see that happening among your different communities? Or is there, like, do we need to have like a, like, you know, do we need to have, you know, like the idea of like Marx, like, you know, like we need to raise consciousness in privacy?
It's almost like you're describing, right, there's the concept in ancient Greece, right? They couldn't see the color blue, and like at a certain point it became this like social construct, and you're basically saying, was there a point at which like privacy entered the social awareness?
Yeah, I mean, well, like, do we need, like, what is the public, yeah, I mean, I guess privacy has entered with the internet. It's now here. But is there, as you're growing your communities that are all privacy, two of privacy focused and one is private, I mean, privacy, Ethereum is also interested in privacy. Like what sort of education do you think, or consciousness raising needs to happen? Does that make, that sort of, it's like, how do you teach someone what blue is?
I think we need to move away from just trying to convince people that financial privacy matters. Data privacy probably to a large extent matters much more. Maybe not much more, but like in a different way. It's like, because surveillance is blowing up our democracies, effectively speaking. The only reason why Facebook can be used by troll farms to influence election outcomes is it's not an inherent feature of the system. It's just the fact that they have all this data and they can micro-target people as a result of this, right? Like, we should care about privacy guarantees outside of simply wanting to have like private financial systems. We need to care about privacy guarantees in a much more broad sense, where like privacy guarantees are good for democracies. Privacy guarantees, like without privacy guarantees, other people have a very easy time in attacking democratic systems, and like this is clearly not a good thing. So even outside of a blockchain space, people should very much care about privacy guarantees.
Yeah, I think that like that is a point that doesn't, that like a point in the conversation that isn't reached often enough. You know, the old chestnut, I have nothing to hide. Like it's not about you. It's about like all of this, that like the sort of surveillance economy has really just blown apart every sense of like social order. You can't sort of trust reality in any meaningful way anymore, and that damages everything. And the people that hold those levers, you know, whoever they are, like, do you trust them? You don't even know who they are. I don't know if they even exist. Like, I don't even know if somebody has a plan here. I just know that like everything has been so kind of undermined, like by this shift in the way that information is shared and not shared, and wars are fought over it, and it just like is not about the individual for the most part. There are terrifying things that can happen to individuals as a result of those same systems being in place, but on the whole, like the average person, if they're just going to be selfish about it, like it's not about someone attacking them, it's about the sort of order of the world.
Yeah, I think the other thing too, especially with privacy, is we tend to talk a lot about kind of the stick and not the carrot, right? I definitely think we're seeing in the news like a lot of these kind of turning points, right? These kind of leaks or these scary moments, right? Like I don't know, the TikTok algorithm making females in their teenage years severely more depressed, right? But really, I think we should also be looking at kind of like what's the carrot of it. And so, for example, at Urbit, like we really think about what's the benefit of owning all of your data, right? Because right now we have like these fractured systems, right? Your medical data is stuck across a variety of different facilities. Your social data is locked up in Facebook and whatnot. Your financial data, maybe you're doing a little bit better. Maybe it's on the blockchain. It's not locked up in like Charles Schwab. I don't know. But like what gets really exciting, I think, is when that is all hopefully maybe centralized to you or your community, like what that can unlock for you is kind of insane.
Maybe actually because, sort of to build on this community aspect, we should think of privacy as a collective effort. It is not an individual thing. We can think of this as herd immunity or just like, defense by being a large group. It's not about the individual protecting their own personal privacy. It's about like the population, the collective being more resilient as a whole by everyone contributing a little bit with it by like being private themselves.
I think it's a little bit tricky to build sort of a mass narrative around also, though. Like, I think you make a really good point about sort of, you see, it's easy to show the terrible things that happen, but the really cool things that happen, they happen privately. Like, and people don't necessarily want to broadcast them. That's kind of the point. So we're trying to get a whole lot of people to all do something different, and that is like harder to coordinate than trying to get everyone to be the same. And so I think that it's hard to have kind of one message. Like, it really depends on people passing this ideal or like these values from like one person to the next and having experiences together that then make them want to sort of transmit and repeat those experiences with other people. And as soon as you like make it a public spectacle, you've sort of defeated the purpose.
Yeah, although I kind of keep going back to kind of your aesthetic presentation before. And it's interesting, right? Like that we're trying to find those aesthetics to describe or show what it could be, or what is that future, and it's definitely hard to lead people into the unknown.
And I want to thank everyone for this fantastic panel. I think our time is up. And we are going to spread privacy, but in a private way. So no one's going to really know how we do it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.